My dad and stepmom publicly took my dead mom's house to save their pregnant golden child, treated me like disposable trash, and forced me out, until one quiet legal move turned their fake stability into a total public collapse. I, 34, male, work as an automotive mechanic at a busy independent shop in Tacoma, Washington, and live in the house my mom Sarah left me when she passed away 7 years ago. It's a solid 3-bedroom ranch-style home worth about $485,000 now, thanks to the absolutely crazy housing market we've been experiencing. Not mansion money by any stretch of the imagination, but it's mine, completely paid off, and sitting on a beautiful quarter-acre lot in a decent neighborhood with excellent schools and low crime rates. My mom worked her absolute tail off for 28 grueling years as a surgical technician at Tacoma General Hospital to pay this place off entirely. She always told me it would be my inheritance someday, her way of making sure I'd never be homeless or throwing money away on rent like so many people our age. That woman was tougher than a $2 steak and twice as valuable to me. She grew up dirt poor in rural Montana, joined the military at 18 years old, used her hard-earned GI benefits for medical training, and worked countless double shifts for years to afford this house. She raised me completely alone after my biological father, Victor, walked out on us when I was only 8 years old, claiming he needed to find himself or some similar garbage. This house isn't just walls and a roof to me. It represents absolutely everything she sacrificed to give me a stable foundation in life. Every overtime shift she picked up when she was exhausted every weekend, she missed relaxing and having fun. Every time she ate simple meals so I could have proper nutrition and school supplies. When I walk through that front door after a long day diagnosing complex engine problems or rebuilding transmissions, I can still feel her presence in every single room. The kitchen where she taught me to change my own oil in the driveway when I was 12. The living room where we watched NASCAR races together every Sunday afternoon. The little workshop in the garage where she patiently helped me rebuild my very first motorcycle engine when I was 16. Victor showed up again when I was 15, practically begging Mom to take him back after his second marriage had completely fallen apart. She told him exactly where he could go in terms that would make a sailor blush, which was probably the most impressive display of backbone I'd ever witnessed from anyone. But just 2 years later, he married this absolute piece of work named Diana, who had a spoiled 12-year-old daughter named Brittany from her previous marriage that had also ended in disaster. From the very first day I met them at some awkward family dinner, Brittany was treated like she was made of pure gold and could do absolutely no wrong whatsoever. Private school tuition that cost more than most people make in several months. Designer clothes that cost more than most people's car payments. A brand new iPhone every single year whether she needed it or not. Family vacations to Mexico and Hawaii that probably cost more than my mom made in 6 months of grueling hospital work. Meanwhile, I was working summers at the local auto parts store to buy my own school supplies and save up money for community college classes. Not that I minded one bit. Mom had taught me the real value of earning what you get through honest hard work and personal responsibility. Brittany, who's now 29, never learned that particular lesson about work and responsibility. She's one of those social media influencer types who genuinely believes the world owes her everything simply because she's reasonably attractive and knows how to take the perfect selfie with the right lighting. She's been through more boyfriends than I have sets of work coveralls, usually targeting guys with serious money until they inevitably get tired of her entitled attitude and selfish behavior and dump her. Classic gold digger behavior that would make an old-time prospector jealous of her techniques. I kept absolutely minimal contact with Victor's side of the family after Mom died from cancer. Maybe see them at Christmas dinner or the occasional birthday party when I felt obligated, but that was the complete extent of our relationship. I had my own life to worry about and focus on. My job at the mechanic shop pays pretty well at $78,000 a year, plus overtime opportunities. I've got a solid group of friends who actually respect me and my choices, and I spend my weekends working on my beloved 1989 Mustang GT or fishing peacefully at American Lake. Simple life with absolutely no unnecessary drama or complications. That peaceful existence changed completely 6 months ago when Brittany's latest sugar daddy, some tech entrepreneur named Tyler who owned a successful app development company, finally figured out what she really was underneath all the manipulation and kicked her to the curb. Apparently, she was already about 4 months pregnant by then, which explains why she immediately moved back in with Diana and Victor, instead of hunting for the next wallet to target. The warning signs were definitely there from the very beginning, but I was too focused on my own life and responsibilities to pay proper attention. I should have known that people like Brittany don't just accept setbacks quietly and move on with their lives. They scheme, They manipulate. They plot revenge. And they always think they deserve whatever they want from other people, regardless of who gets hurt in the process or whose lives get destroyed. The first real sign of serious trouble came when Victor called me on a Tuesday evening while I was working late on a customer's complicated transmission rebuild that required complete disassembly. He never calls unless someone's in the hospital or getting married, so I immediately figured it had to be something genuinely serious and potentially expensive. "Ryan, we really need to sit down and have a very serious conversation about some extremely important family business that affects all of us," he said in this overly formal tone that immediately made my skin crawl with suspicion and dread. I drove over to their ridiculously oversized Mexi mansion in Federal Way the following Saturday afternoon, already dreading whatever ridiculous scheme they had cooked up. Diana answered the door wearing enough makeup to paint a small building, and Brittany was sprawled, dramatically across their expensive leather sectional sofa, rubbing her obviously pregnant belly like she was polishing some kind of magical crystal ball that would grant her wishes. She was about 7 months along at that point, and absolutely milking the pregnancy situation for everything it was possibly worth with anyone who would listen. Victor wasted absolutely no time getting straight to his main point, which should have been my first warning sign. Brittany's going to need a proper stable place to raise her child when it arrives in a few months. Our current house really doesn't have the right kind of setup for a newborn baby with all the crying and sleepless nights. I almost started laughing out loud right there in their living room. Their house is easily 30,500 square feet, with 5 enormous bedrooms, 2 separate living rooms, and a kitchen bigger than most people's entire apartments. But apparently that massive space wasn't good enough for Princess Brittany and her upcoming bundle of joy. Diana immediately jumped into the conversation with this sickeningly fake sweet voice that made my teeth hurt. "Ryan, sweetie, you're just rattling around in that big house all by yourself like some kind of hermit. No girlfriend, no wife, no children of your own to take care of. It honestly seems like such a terrible waste of space and resources. You know, Brittany really needs a stable, secure environment for the baby to grow up healthy, and your place would be absolutely perfect for raising a child." Then Brittany finally decided to speak up, not even bothering to look directly at me while she delivered her entitled demands. "Tyler was supposed to buy us a proper house together before the baby arrived, but he turned out to be a complete loser who abandoned his responsibilities. I desperately need somewhere decent to live now, and your place has absolutely everything I need for the baby. 3 bedrooms for growing, big backyard for playing, good school district nearby for education. It makes perfect sense for everyone involved." The sheer level of entitlement was absolutely unbelievable and beyond anything I could have imagined. She was talking about my house, the house my mother literally died working to pay for, like it was some rental property she was casually considering for her convenience and comfort. "That's absolutely not happening under any circumstances," I said as firmly and clearly as possible. "This is my home that my mother left specifically to me in her will. End of discussion. Period." Victor leaned forward in his chair with this patronizing expression that I remembered from childhood. "Son, your mother would definitely want you to help family members who are in genuine need of assistance. This wouldn't be a permanent arrangement by any means, just until Brittany manages to get back on her feet financially and find her own place." Get back on her feet from what exactly? Getting pregnant by some guy who finally saw through her manipulation? Brittany's face immediately turned bright red with anger and indignation. "Excuse me, I didn't choose to be completely abandoned while carrying an innocent child who deserves stability. No, but you absolutely chose to get romantically involved with a guy you barely knew just because he had money and could support your expensive lifestyle and shopping habits." Diana gasped dramatically like I'd physically slapped her across the face. "Ryan, that's incredibly cruel and unfair to say about a pregnant woman in crisis. It's also completely accurate and true based on her dating history. And my answer is still absolutely no under any circumstances." Brittany actually stood up from the couch and got right in my face, invading my personal space aggressively. "I'm family, you selfish jerk. I deserve help and support more than you deserve to hoard a house you don't even really need or use properly for anything important. You're not my family by any stretch of the imagination. You're some random woman my father married into our lives 15 years ago, and I don't owe you a single thing, especially not my house." That's when she completely lost whatever composure and fake sweetness she'd been maintaining for the conversation. She started screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was a selfish piece of garbage, how I could never understand what it's like to be vulnerable and pregnant and abandoned, how I was denying her innocent baby the stable home it deserved to grow up healthy, and how any decent person would automatically help family members in crisis without needing to be asked twice. I walked out of that house while she was still having her complete meltdown in their expensive living room, slamming the door behind me. I honestly thought that would be the absolute end of the whole ridiculous situation, and they'd move on to some other solution. Looking back now, I should have known these particular people much better than that and prepared for war. They launched what could only be described as a comprehensive military campaign against me after that disastrous family meeting ended badly. Victor started calling me every single day with some new angle or approach to convince me. Maybe I could rent them the house for significantly below market value as a family favor. Maybe we could work out some kind of long-term payment plan that would benefit everyone involved. Maybe I just didn't fully understand how incredibly difficult it was for a pregnant woman to find decent, affordable housing in the current brutal market conditions. Diana took a completely different approach that was somehow even more annoying and disruptive to my daily life. She began showing up at my workplace on a regular basis, sometimes multiple times per week. The automotive shop where I work, various job sites where I was doing mobile repair calls for customers, even the small family-owned diner where I usually grab lunch between appointments, always with some elaborate sob story about poor, helpless Brittany desperately needing assistance from her loving family during this difficult time. My boss eventually had to tell her to stop coming around because she was seriously disrupting business operations and making our customers extremely uncomfortable with her dramatic performances. Brittany herself took the social media manipulation route to try to pressure me into compliance. She started posting constantly about her heartless family member who was supposedly forcing a pregnant woman into potential homelessness during the worst housing crisis in decades. She never mentioned me by name directly to avoid potential legal consequences, but she tagged all her posts with dramatic hashtags like #FamilyFirst, #Pregnant and Abandoned, #Nowhere to Go, and #Helpless and Alone. Some of her online followers and social media friends even started sending me nasty messages on various platforms, calling me terrible names and accusing me of being heartless and cruel to a pregnant woman in need. Then they decided to escalate their campaign to direct home visits and confrontations, which really crossed a major line for me. Victor would show up unannounced at my front door with baby furniture and supplies, claiming he needed somewhere to store everything temporarily until they figured out permanent living arrangements for Brittany and the baby. Diana brought an actual real estate agent to my front door one afternoon without any warning, saying she wanted to explore potential housing options for me in smaller, more affordable properties that would be more appropriate for a single man. The agent looked absolutely mortified and embarrassed when I told them both exactly what I thought of their surprise visit and sent them away. Brittany's personal visits were by far the worst and most invasive part of the whole harassment campaign they were running. She would show up at my house at all hours with bags full of baby clothes or expensive nursery equipment, acting like she was just casually stopping by to visit family, but really trying to establish some kind of permanent presence and claim in my home. One particularly outrageous afternoon, she brought her entire nursery setup, including a crib, changing table, and rocking chair, and actually started arranging and decorating my spare bedroom while I was at work earning money. I came home to find her hanging expensive curtains and assembling furniture like she already lived there and owned the place. "What in the world do you think you're doing in my house without permission?" I demanded, barely controlling my anger. "Just setting up the baby's room so you can see how perfect it would be," she replied casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I figured you'd want to see how nice and cozy everything could look once it was all properly arranged for the baby's arrival. Get every single piece of this stuff out of my house immediately. You have absolutely no right to be here doing this." She actually had the unbelievable nerve to pout like a spoiled child who'd been denied candy at the grocery store. "Ryan, please be reasonable about this situation. I desperately need somewhere safe and secure to put all this expensive equipment, and you clearly have the available space just sitting empty. That's not my problem to solve for you. You have exactly 30 seconds to start moving this garbage out, or I'm throwing every piece of it into the front yard and calling the police." That's when she started with the waterworks, these huge theatrical tears that would have impressed professional actresses in Hollywood. "Why are you being so incredibly mean and cruel to me? I'm pregnant and scared and desperately need help from my family during the most vulnerable time of my life. Because you're trying to take over my house without any permission whatsoever. Because you think being pregnant automatically gives you the right to whatever you want from other people. Because you're a spoiled brat who's never heard the word no in your entire privileged life." That finally shut her up completely. She packed up all her baby supplies and left in a dramatic huff. but not before saying ominously, "You're really going to regret treating me like this, Ryan. Family takes care of family, and you're going to learn that lesson the hard way." I should have taken that threat much more seriously than I did, and prepared better defenses. 2 weeks later, they made their biggest and most dangerous mistake yet, crossing a line that would ultimately destroy their lives. I came home after working a particularly brutal 12-hour shift diagnosing complex electrical problems in a customer's vintage 1967 Corvette to discover that my house key wouldn't work in my own front door. Just like that, completely locked out of the home my mother had literally died working to provide for me. There was a handwritten note taped to the door in Victor's unmistakable handwriting. "The locks have been changed for security purposes and everyone's safety. Please call us immediately to discuss proper access arrangements." I stood there on my own front porch, still covered in engine grease and metal shavings from the day's intensive work, literally shaking with pure, uncontrolled rage. These people had actually broken into my house and changed the locks on the home my mother had sacrificed everything to buy, my house, the house that represented every overtime shift she'd ever worked, every sacrifice she'd ever made, every dream she'd had for my future security and stability. I immediately called Victor, barely managing to keep my voice steady enough to speak coherently without screaming. "What exactly did you do to my house? And you better have a good explanation now. Just calm down, Ryan. We're simply trying to help Brittany get properly settled in a safe, secure environment for her and the baby. She moved all her belongings in earlier today with our help, and we thought it would be much safer and more secure to change the locks completely for everyone's protection." "She what? She moved into my house without my permission? She's living there now?" "Yes, it's honestly better for everyone involved this way, and you'll see that once you think about it rationally. You can stay here with us temporarily until we manage to figure out a more permanent living arrangement that works for everyone in the family." I couldn't even speak coherently for several long seconds. The audacity was beyond anything I could have possibly imagined in my worst nightmares. "You let that manipulative, lying woman move into my house without any permission whatsoever from me, the actual owner. Don't talk about her like that, Ryan. She's family and she desperately needs our help and support during this difficult time in her life. I don't care what she thinks she needs from me or anyone else. Get her out of there right now and fix my locks immediately, or I'm calling the police to report breaking and entering, theft, and criminal trespassing." "Ryan, please be reasonable about this situation. Where else is she realistically supposed to go with a baby coming in just a few weeks? I honestly don't care if she has to live in her car or a cardboard box under a bridge. Get her out of my house within the next 2 hours, or I'm having all of you arrested for multiple criminal charges." Victor tried desperately to negotiate and find some kind of compromise that would let them keep the house, but I hung up on him and immediately called 911 to report the break-in. The police officers arrived about 40 minutes later, right around the same time as the emergency locksmith I'd called from my truck. Brittany answered my own front door, wearing an expensive silk bathrobe that probably cost more than most people make in a week, acting like she was the legitimate homeowner dealing with some crazy person trying to break into her property. "Officers, thank goodness you're finally here. This dangerous man is trying to break into my house and has been making serious threats against me and my unborn baby." I calmly showed them my driver's license with the exact address, the official deed to the house with my name clearly printed on it, and several months' worth of utility bills proving legal residency and ownership. It didn't take the officers very long to figure out exactly who was telling the truth and who was completely full of lies and manipulation. Brittany desperately tried to claim she was some kind of legal tenant with rights, but she couldn't produce any lease agreement, rental payments, or any other proof of legitimate occupancy or legal status.
"Ma'am, you need to gather all of your belongings immediately and leave these premises,"
one of the officers told her firmly and professionally. "This is completely ridiculous and unfair. I'm 7 months pregnant with nowhere else to go. You can't just throw a pregnant woman out onto the street like some kind of criminal. You're currently trespassing on private property without the owner's permission. You can leave voluntarily right now, or we can arrest you for unlawful entry and criminal trespassing." It took her over 3 hours to pack up all the baby-related items and personal belongings she'd moved into my house during her brief illegal occupation. Diana and Victor showed up during the eviction process with a moving truck, desperately trying to convince the police officers that this was all just some terrible family misunderstanding that could be resolved peacefully. The officers weren't buying their story for even a second and made it clear that any further attempts to enter the property would result in arrests. When they finally left my property completely, I had the locksmith install brand new deadbolts and a heavy-duty security chain on both the front and back doors. Then I called my friend who owns a security company and had a complete camera system installed that very night. Motion sensors, night vision capability, smartphone alerts, the works. If they tried anything else illegal, I would have clear video evidence of their criminal behavior to use in court. But I really should have known that people like them never give up when they think they deserve something that belongs to someone else, especially something as valuable as a house. The very next morning, I called my lawyer and explained the entire bizarre situation from beginning to end, including all the harassment and the break-in. He listened carefully to every detail of their comprehensive campaign against me, then dropped an absolutely devastating bombshell that changed everything and revealed the true scope of their plan. Ryan, I need to tell you something extremely important that you're not going to like. Your father contacted our office 3 weeks ago asking very specific questions about contesting your mother's will and challenging your inheritance. My blood went completely cold, and I felt like someone had just punched me directly in the stomach with a sledgehammer. What exactly do you mean by that? Be specific. He wanted to know if there was any possible legal way to claim the house as community property from his previous marriage to your mother, even though they divorced many years before she passed away and the house was purchased afterward. He was asking about filing some kind of paternal claim as your biological father to challenge the will's validity. The betrayal hit me harder than anything I'd ever experienced in my entire life. This entire time, while Victor was pretending to just want to help his precious stepdaughter find housing, he had actually been plotting behind my back to steal the inheritance my mother had left specifically to me in her carefully written will. Is that something he can actually do legally? Can he challenge Mom's will? Absolutely not under any circumstances. Your mother's will is completely ironclad and was prepared by our best estate attorney. The house was purchased entirely after their divorce with her own income from her job. But the fact that he's actively exploring these legal options means this whole situation isn't really about helping Brittany find housing for her baby. They're actually trying to steal your property through legal manipulation and fraud. My lawyer immediately sent a formal cease and desist letter that same afternoon. No more unwelcome visits, no more harassment of any kind, no more attempts to access my property without explicit permission. I also discovered something incredibly interesting and useful during our conversation. Brittany had been telling people all around town that she was my legal tenant and that I was illegally evicting her in violation of state housing laws, which could get me in serious legal trouble. The lies were getting more elaborate and more dangerous by the day. She was posting constantly on social media about her abusive landlord and had even started a crowdfunding campaign for legal fees to fight an illegal eviction and protect her baby. The description made me sound like some predatory slumlord throwing a helpless pregnant woman onto the street for no reason other than pure cruelty. When my friend showed me all the online posts and the fundraising page, I completely lost my composure. This woman was actively trying to destroy my reputation in the community while simultaneously attempting to steal my house and turn me into a villain in her fabricated story. That's when I made the crucial decision to stop playing defense and go on the complete offensive, to protect myself and my property. I spent the following month quietly but systematically collecting information about Brittany's real activities and background. What I discovered was absolutely shocking and far worse than I'd imagined. Brittany had been extremely busy since Tyler dumped her several months earlier. She was active on every single dating application in the entire Seattle metropolitan area, explicitly mentioning her pregnancy in her profiles and stating that she was looking for a real man who can provide stability and security for her and her baby. My friend who works in information technology helped me document her extensive online activity across multiple platforms. We took detailed screenshots of her dating profiles where she openly talked about needing someone to help with living expenses and provide financial support for her and her baby's future. We found multiple message threads where she directly asked potential dates about their annual income, current living situations, and financial assets before agreeing to meet them in person for dates. She was also still claiming to be homeless and desperate, while actually living comfortably in Diana and Victor's $500,000 mansion, with all expenses paid. The crowdfunding campaign had raised approximately $3,200 from sympathetic people who completely believed her fabricated story about being victimized by her cruel and heartless stepbrother, who was throwing her out on the street. But the most valuable information came from what I discovered about Tyler, her baby's supposed father. It turned out he hadn't just randomly dumped her without good reason. She had actually been stealing money from him systematically over several months. Credit card fraud, forged checks, unauthorized purchases on his accounts, the complete criminal package. He hadn't pressed formal charges because he just wanted her completely out of his life forever, but he had carefully documented absolutely everything for his own protection. I reached out to Tyler through a mutual acquaintance, and we met for coffee one afternoon at a neutral location. He turned out to be a genuinely decent person who had been completely manipulated and taken advantage of by a professional con artist. Man, she had me totally convinced she was this sweet, innocent woman who just needed help getting back on her feet after a terrible, abusive relationship, he explained with obvious pain in his voice. It took me almost 6 months to realize she was basically a professional con artist who made a living targeting successful men. What finally made you realize the truth about her? I found out she was still married to another man, still legally married. Her husband lives down in California, and she's been running this exact same scam while technically being his wife the entire time. The baby might not even be mine. She was seeing multiple guys simultaneously and lying to all of them. This was exactly the kind of devastating ammunition I needed to destroy her credibility completely. Brittany wasn't just entitled and manipulative. She was an actual criminal running elaborate scams across multiple states. And I was about to make sure everyone in town knew the complete truth about her criminal activities. I decided to wait until Brittany's baby shower to execute my carefully planned revenge for maximum public impact. Diana had organized this massive celebration at their house, inviting about half the neighborhood and posting about it extensively on social media to show off their wealth and generosity. It was the perfect opportunity to expose the truth to the largest possible audience at the same time. I showed up completely uninvited with a thick folder full of documented evidence, and Tyler as my backup witness to verify everything. Diana tried to physically block me at the front door, but I walked past her into the backyard where approximately 40 people were celebrating Brittany's upcoming motherhood with expensive gifts and congratulations. "Sorry to interrupt this lovely party," I announced loudly enough for everyone to hear clearly, "but I thought all of you should know exactly who you're really supporting here with your time and money." Brittany went completely pale when she saw me standing there with documentation. "Ryan, what are you doing here? This is a private celebration and you weren't invited." "Yes. Well, I thought your guests might want to know they're giving expensive baby gifts to a married woman who's been running an elaborate criminal scam on the entire community." The entire backyard went dead silent. Diana tried desperately to intervene and control the situation, but I kept talking loudly. Everyone here probably heard Brittany's tragic sob story about her mean stepbrother making her homeless, right? What she conveniently didn't mention is that she broke into my house illegally, changed the locks without permission, and tried to steal my property. What she also failed to mention is that she's still legally married to a man in California. I pulled out the official marriage certificate Tyler had helped me obtain from public records. Brittany Ross, legally married to Derek Thompson in Las Vegas, Nevada, 3 years ago, never divorced, which makes her entire abandoned, single mom story a complete fabrication designed to steal money from all of you. The crowd started murmuring and looking at each other with confusion and growing anger. Brittany was turning bright red and starting to panic visibly. We're legally separated, but still married, which makes everything you've told these people a lie. And what about the systematic theft and fraud?" I held up all the documentation Tyler had provided, stealing over $4,000 from the father of your baby, forging checks, and committing credit card fraud. "How about this evidence?" I showed everyone her dating application profiles on my phone screen. Currently active on 4 different dating apps, looking for generous men to support her and her baby financially, while simultaneously claiming to be homeless and accepting charity from all of you good people. One of the guests, an elderly woman I didn't recognize, stood up with obvious anger and disgust. "Is this actually true, Brittany? Have you been lying to all of us?" Before she could formulate any kind of response or denial, Tyler stepped forward to address the crowd directly. "Everything he's saying is completely accurate, and I have documentation to prove it. I'm Tyler, the supposed deadbeat baby father she's been complaining about. She stole over $4,300 from me through various fraudulent means and was running this exact same scam on at least 3 other men at the same time." The entire party erupted in complete chaos. People were demanding their expensive gifts back immediately, asking how much of her story was lies, calling her absolutely disgusting and a criminal. Diana was desperately trying to do damage control and save face, but it was far too late to save the situation or their reputation. Victor finally appeared from inside the house, looking completely bewildered and shocked. "Ryan, what in the world are you doing to our family reputation?" "Exposing the complete truth about your precious stepdaughter's criminal activities. But I'm not finished yet with the revelations. I pulled out my phone and called the fraud hotline for the county housing authority. Hello, I'd like to report welfare fraud. Someone has been claiming to be homeless while actually living in a house worth $500,000. Then I called the state tax fraud reporting line. I'd like to report unreported income from a crowdfunding campaign and possible tax evasion by someone who's been lying on government forms. Brittany was crying real tears now, not the fake ones she usually used for manipulation. Stop it. You're completely destroying my life and my baby's future. You tried to destroy mine first when you broke into my house. The difference is everything I'm saying is actually true and provable in court. As the disgusted guests filed out of the party in anger, many of them angrily demanding immediate refunds for their expensive gifts, I handed Victor one final piece of paper. What's this supposed to be? A formal lawsuit for harassment, criminal trespassing, attempted theft, and emotional distress. My lawyer filed it this morning. You're being sued for $75,000 in damages, legal fees, and punitive damages. Diana was screaming at me about destroying their family reputation and social standing, but I was already walking back to my truck with Tyler. As I reached the street, I could hear Brittany having a complete emotional breakdown in the backyard. The aftermath was swift and absolutely devastating for all of them. Within 2 weeks, Brittany's actual husband, Derek, drove up from California after finding out about her latest scam through mutual friends who had seen the baby shower incident shared on social media. He was filing for divorce immediately and had outstanding criminal warrants for her arrest on similar fraud charges down in California. The investigation into her welfare fraud revealed that she had been illegally collecting benefits while living in a mansion and had lied on multiple government applications. The IRS audit of her crowdfunding campaign uncovered unreported income and led to serious tax evasion charges that could result in prison time. Victor and Diana ended up settling my lawsuit for $35,000 to avoid the public embarrassment of going to trial and having all the sordid details become public record. They also had to pay for my complete security system installation and all legal fees, which totaled another $8,000. Tyler's DNA test proved he wasn't the father after all. Turns out the real father was some married businessman she'd been simultaneously scamming in Spokane. The man was furious when he found out about her lies and immediately filed his own criminal charges against her. Last I heard, Brittany was living in a women's shelter in San Diego, facing multiple criminal charges in 2 different states. Her social media accounts had been shut down after people who had donated to her crowdfunding campaign reported her for fraud. The state was also investigating her for welfare fraud and demanding repayment of all benefits plus penalties.